Catch us.
Yeah. We're going to chat for 10 or 15 minutes. Can I ask you to stop taking photographs as we chat, because it's just so distracting for both of us. And I'll just ask this other thing now before we begin. When we get to the end of the conversation, can I ask you to just, as a courtesy, stay in your seats whilst we leave the stage? That would be really helpful. So now on to the sort of important questions. You mentioned in your introduction your fascination with the subject, but obviously it's a very long journey to get from being fascinated with something to where we are tonight. Could you tell us a little bit about how long the journey took, and particularly the research that you did, because I know that you did a massive amount of research.
Well, I would say it took about 3 years to get to the point where I felt like I was in a position to be able to write the script. So 3 years of reading and meeting people and interviewing and legwork and meeting people who knew the Duchess or the Duke, watching every documentary ever made, going to archival libraries, doing tons and tons of research, meeting anyone who had a letter, who owned a letter, who had a connection to somebody who had a letter. I did read an enormous amount of letters because in spite of all the books that had been written about Wallace and Edward VIII and the royal family and this period of time, I found that reading the letters was the most insightful way into the story and the best way to get to know them, because when you write letters to somebody, you don't know that someone else is going to read them, just the person you're writing the letter to. So you get to have an insight that you wouldn't have by reading a book that someone's writing knowing that other people are going to read it.
And I mean, I think it's very refreshing as someone who grew up in this country and was, told a certain history of the relationship, and, we were all sort of given the story of Edward who gave up everything for her. Telling it more from her point of view and, giving us some insight into what she gave up, is that something that evolved during the research, or were you always kind of more interested?
I think I was drawn into the story by first trying to understand why a person in such a powerful position would give up something like that for love. It seemed like such a huge sacrifice, and in a way, to me, I thought it was incredibly brave because men are power-seeking creatures by nature, and most of them are fighting their way to the throne. So the idea that someone would give up this perceived power of position for love was fascinating to me. So I was trying to uncover what I perceived to be this great romance, and in the uncovering of the story, I saw a whole other point of view. I saw what she went through. I saw how she ran away from it. I saw how she saw the writing on the wall and knew that it was all going to go tits up. Excuse my French. So it was, to me, when Wally goes to Alfred's office and says, I think it's important to tell the story from her point of view, that was really the conclusion I came to at the end of all my research.
And at what point did you decide to integrate in the more modern story, the story of Wally?
Well, I think it's important to understand and accept that truth is subjective, and, we all can read stories and do as much research as we want on a person, but how we interpret the story and what we take away from it is always going to be different than somebody else. So it was important. I never set out to make the quintessential, historical biopic of the abdication of Edward VIII, or the true story about what lies behind the romance of Wallace and Edward. I thought it was important to give the story a point of view and to remind the audience that this is the story seen through the eyes of a young woman who's searching for love and the meaning of happiness.
And you co-wrote the script with Alec Kashishian, who you've worked with before. tell us a little bit in kind of practical terms how that process worked? Did you pass drafts between each other, or you literally wrote together? How did you do that?
We sat in a room and threatened each other if we didn't get off of our Blackberries. First of all, I had to hide his more than he had to hide mine. And we shared a computer, and I mean, it's really simple. We had the script up on a big screen, and we just passed it back and forth, and we just kind of riffed off of each other, and we spent weeks together writing, and then we'd go away and we'd read the drafts, and then we'd change scenes and email them to each other, and then we'd spend time together again writing, and just went on like that for about a year and a half. Yeah.
And do you enjoy the process of writing?
I love the process of writing. It's nice.